Lieutenant Jack Steele's F-17 Star Falcon is torn apart over Sierra 7. Plasma scorches the cockpit as he crashes into the jungle. A blue-skinned Vashal warrior approaches through the smoke, the same pilot who shot him down. But instead of finishing him, the enemy offers a hand and speaks 6 words that change everything. The Starhound's approach is silent, its 6 limbs moving with unnerving coordination through the dense undergrowth. It lowers its wedge-shaped head, testing the air thick with the acrid tang of plasma and the sweet metallic scent of fresh blood. Jack remains pinned in the wreckage, his right leg bent at a sickening angle, jagged shards of the cockpit digging into his side. Every breath sends a sharp, hot pain through his ribs. He can't move, can't reach his sidearm, and his emergency beacon lies crushed somewhere beneath him. His vision swims, blurring the green and gray of the jungle into a dizzying smear. Movement in the tree line catches the corner of his eye, and he braces for more hunters. But it's the Vashal pilot, the same one who sent him spiraling down. Blue skin, dark tactical armor, eyes sharp as cut glass. The enemy warrior steps clear of the smoke, his stride deliberate. He doesn't look at the Starhound, though the creature freezes, sensing another predator. Jack's hand tightens around a shard of durasteel, ready to fight or die trying. But the Vashal moves past the Starhound without hesitation. His focus is solely on the human. He crouches beside the wreckage and speaks, the words rough-edged, filtered through an unfamiliar accent but clear. "Don't move." His tone is flat, factual. He reaches for Jack's leg, ignoring the makeshift weapon in the human's hand. Jack flinches, expecting a blade, a shot execution. Instead, the alien's hands are deft, clinical. He probes the brake, then pulls a compact kit from his belt. No words, just motion. A quick anesthetic spray, a solid grip, then a sharp twist. The bone sets with a low grind. Jack grits his teeth, sweat beading along his hairline. The warrior binds the leg with a rigid splint and fastens it tight. Just then, the Starhound decides. It charges, a blur of muscle and claws, jaws gaping wide enough to tear a man in half. The Vashal spins, already moving. He doesn't draw a blaster. Instead, his hand flashes to his hip and comes up with a long, thin vibro knife. He sidesteps the lunge, drops low, and drives the blade up under the creature's jaw. It shudders, collapses, twitching. The warrior yanks the blade free, wipes it clean on the beast's hide, and sheathes it. He turns back to Jack as if he'd just swatted an insect. "This planet is the enemy," he says, voice low. "Not you, not me. Sierra 7. He extends a hand again, this time to pull Jack free from the wreckage. The Starhound lies dead between them. The choice is made. Survival now, war later. Rin loops Jack's arm over his shoulder and starts moving. Every step is a sharp, grating pain up Jack's leg. The alien doesn't rush, doesn't panic. He moves with a deliberate economy, each foot placed carefully, his weight shifting to minimize sound. The jungle presses in around them, heavy and watchful. High canopy blocks most of the light, leaving the floor in a deep green twilight. Things move in the shadows. Low chitters. Something heavy shifting in the wet leaves nearby. Rin's head never stops turning. His eyes scan the ground, the trees, the air. He reads the environment like a tactical display. A broken frond here. A particular scrape on bark there. Signs Jack can't begin to interpret, they don't speak. Communication is a nudge, a pointed finger, a low grunt of warning. Jack stumbles on a root, biting back a cry. Rin freezes instantly, one hand coming up in a sharp, flat gesture for silence. They stand there for a full minute, listening. The jungle seems to listen back. Then a low, resonant hoot echoes from far to their left. Rin's shoulders relax a fraction. He gives a single short nod and they move again, slower this time. Jack realizes the Vashal isn't just a pilot. He knows this place. He understands its rhythms, its threats. This is more than a crash site for him. It's familiar ground, the incline steepens. Jack's breath comes in ragged pulls. Rin supports most of his weight without complaint, his own breathing steady and controlled. The ground turns rockier, the soil giving way to slick stone. Rin tests each handhold before trusting it, his blue fingers probing for loose shale. He moves with a fluid certainty that speaks of harsh training or harsh experience. Probably both. They crest a low ridge. Rin lowers Jack against the broad base of a twisted gray-barked tree. The vantage point offers a sliver of a view through the dense foliage. Below, the jungle is a rolling sea of green. In the distance, a wide silvery ribbon cuts through the valley. The river. Rin points to it, his expression grim. He then raises 2 fingers, touches his own eyes, and sweeps his hand in a slow arc across the landscape. "Watch everything. He mimes drinking from cupped hands, then points firmly at the river again. That's the goal. Water, a crossing point, a possible way out. The directive is clear, unspoken, and absolute. Their shared objective is no longer abstract. It is a tangible line on the horizon, a destination that means the difference between dying on this ridge and living to see another sunrise. The enmity between their species, the war raging in the stars above, it all shrinks down to this one: brutal necessity. They need to get to that river. Cooperation isn't a philosophical choice. It's a mechanical one. They are two broken parts of a single machine that must function, or they will both be scavenged by the jungle. Rin turns from the view, his eyes already scanning the path down. The truce is no longer just unspoken. It is operational. The wreckage smells of ozone and burnt polymer. They move through it carefully, the silence between them now filled with purpose. The starhound's body lies where it fell, already attracting swarms of buzzing iridescent insects. Jack keeps one hand braced against a warped strut for support, his eyes tracking Rin's movements. The Vashal warrior pries open a fractured maintenance panel with the edge of his knife. Inside, a tangle of copper wiring and fiber optic leads glints in the filtered light. This is the source of their next problem: trust. Rin pulls a coil of wire free, then holds out a heavy-duty cutting tool from his belt. He offers it handle first to Jack. The gesture is simple, practical. The tool is a weapon, a solid blow to the temple, a quick slash across the throat. Jack hesitates, his training screaming at him. This is the enemy. This is the pilot who fired the missile, the one who turned his Star Falcon into burning scrap. "You're the one who shot me down," Jack says. The words are flat, an accusation stripped of heat by exhaustion. Rin doesn't look up from the panel he's working on. His blue fingers continue sorting components. "Yes," he says. No hesitation. No justification. The honesty is more disarming than a lie would have been. He simply acknowledges the fact, a stone dropped into still water, and keeps working. He points to a section of intact hull plating. That section. The sealant may still be viable. He speaks about the wreckage not as an enemy ship, but as a source of material, a resource they work. Jack cuts the plating free while Rin salvages power cells from a secondary console. The warrior's familiarity with human systems is unsettling. He knows where the emergency battery backups are located. He understands the fail-safe releases on the oxygen scrubbers. He taps a shattered nav compass. "The gyroscopic housing," he says. "It is sealed. We can use it for buoyancy. This isn't guesswork. It's knowledge. The kind of deep technical understanding that comes from study, from intelligence briefings, or from pulling apart captured vessels bolt by bolt." The tension doesn't vanish. It transforms. It becomes the shared strain of lifting a heavy section of fuselage, the focused concentration of weaving stripped wiring into a strong, loose net, the silent negotiation of how to lash the plating to the gyro housing, using the elastic polymer strands Rin harvested from a vine. They don't plan. They don't debate. They see a problem and move to solve it. Rin's hands are quick, efficient. Jack's movements are slower, hampered by his leg but precise. They build a raft. It's a ugly, clumsy thing. A patchwork of alien and human technology lashed together with jungle fiber and desperation. It looks like it might hold together for 10 seconds in calm water. It is their only chance. They finish securing the last knot. Rin tests the lashings with a firm tug, then nods once, a curt, professional assessment. Jack leans against the wreckage, breathing hard. They haven't spoken more than 10 words to each other since the accusation, yet in the space of an hour they have built something, a thing that did not exist before, a fragile possibility. The work itself became the only conversation that mattered. Out here, the act of building a future, however temporary, speaks with a louder voice than any flag or uniform ever could. The current grabs the raft the moment it hits the water. It's not a gentle pull. It's a hard, fast yank that nearly tears it from their hands. The water is a churning, opaque gray, cold enough to steal the breath. Beneath the surface, shadows move. Not large, but many. A school of them. Their bodies long and narrow, their backs ridged with a serrated, bony fin that cuts the water like a blade. Razorbacks. The name doesn't do them justice. They're more like piranhas with armor plating and a taste for anything that bleeds or floats. They push off from the bank, the raft rocking violently. Jack uses a salvaged strut to pull, fighting the current's drag. Rin kneels in the center, his weight low, one hand gripping the wiring net, his eyes fixed on the water. The first impact is a dull thump against the hull plating, then another, A dozen more. The sound is a rapid metallic clicking, like 100 keys tapping on metal.
They are gnawing.
Their teeth, small and sharp as diamond-tipped needles, working on the wiring that holds the raft together. A lashing on Jack's side unravels with a snap. The current immediately tugs at the loose plate, threatening to peel the whole structure apart. The raft lists taking on water. The clicking intensifies, a frenzied rhythm from below. Another wire severs. Then a third. The raft is coming undone beneath them, piece by piece. The buoyant gyro housing starts to shift, tilting the deck at a steep angle. They're seconds from being dumped into a river full of teeth. Rin's hand shoots out, pointing upstream. A jagged cluster of black rock breaks the surface 40 meters ahead. A temporary island, a chance. There's no time to discuss it. The raft groans, the central beam splintering. They go into the water together. The cold is a shock, a fist closing around Jack's chest. The current tries to roll him. He kicks with his good leg, his movements clumsy and panicked. The razorbacks swarm. He feels sharp, burning nips on his arms, his legs, through his flight suit. It's not one big bite. It's 1,000 small ones, a cloud of pinpricks tearing at him. He sees Rin swimming ahead, his blue arm cutting through the water in a strong, efficient stroke. But even he is jerking as the fish strike. Jack's hand finds the cargo pouch on his belt. His fingers, numb with cold, fumble for the emergency flare. He gets it free, yanks the ignition tab. Nothing. The water. He forces his arm above the surface, shields the tip with his body, and tries again. A hiss, a sputter, then a blinding white-hot flame erupts. He dunks the burning end into the fuel-soaked rag he'd tied around its base before they left. Fire blossoms on the water's surface, fed by the volatile chemical accelerant. It doesn't last long, maybe 5 seconds, but it creates a roaring, boiling wall of light and heat between them and the main school. The razorbacks recoil from the sudden inferno, their relentless clicking replaced by the sizzle of superheated water. They use those precious seconds. They swim hard, driven by pure adrenaline, ignoring the fresh bites from stragglers. They reach the rocks, clawing their way onto the slippery, uneven surface. They collapse, gasping, bleeding from 100 tiny wounds, the current tearing past their temporary refuge. The flames die out. The river returns to its churning gray. But they are out of it. For now. The rocks are cold and slippery under their hands. They crouch low, shoulders hunched, water streaming from their clothes. The river churns around their tiny island, the surface still dotted with the drifting, scorched forms of razorbacks. The immediate screaming urgency is gone. What's left is the deep, bone-level ache of exhaustion. Jack's hands tremble as he checks the dozens of small, bleeding punctures on his arms. Each one burns with a sharp, clean pain. Rin does the same, his blue fingers probing a deeper bite on his calf. His expression is flat, unreadable. The quiet is heavy. It's the kind of silence where old thoughts come back, where the fact that they are supposed to be killing each other gets loud again. Jack looks at the floating fish. He looks at the Vashal warrior methodically tying a strip of cloth around his wound. The sheer absurdity of it all hits him. A dry, exhausted sound escapes his lips, not quite a cough, not quite a laugh. Well, he says, his voice rough. Sushi's done. He gestures weakly at the river. Rin's head comes up. His dark eyes fix on Jack. There's a long pause. Jack can almost see the translation happening behind those eyes. The parsing of the unfamiliar idiom. The cultural context shifting into place. The tension returns for a second. A wire pulled taut. Then something shifts in Rin's face. A faint, almost imperceptible tightening at the corners of his mouth. His reply is deadpan, delivered with a warrior's precision. Medium rare. The line is so perfectly delivered, so utterly unexpected that it shatters the remaining distance between them. Jack's quiet chuckle erupts into a full, ragged laugh that hurts his ribs. It's a raw sound, stripped of armor. Rin doesn't laugh out loud, but a low, rough sound rumbles in his chest and his shoulders loosen. He gives a short, sharp nod, a gesture of acknowledgement. The sound of their laughter is a foreign thing in that deadly place. It doesn't belong there. It cuts through the grim reality of their situation like a beam of light through deep water. For that moment, the uniforms vanish. The flags they fight for mean nothing. The wreckage of their ships is just scrap metal. They are just two men, battered and bleeding, sitting on a rock after cheating a brutal death. The shared absurdity of their survival, the dark, practical joke of it, becomes a common language. It's more honest than any negotiation. It's the first real thing they've shared that wasn't about immediate life-or-death necessity. A recognition passes between them, clear and unspoken. Under the armor, Under the training and the propaganda and the sworn oaths, they are the same. They both understand the cost of a fight. They both know the taste of fear and the weariness that comes after. The laugh fades, leaving a different kind of quiet in its wake. The truce is no longer just a matter of survival. It has become, in that single, unguarded moment, something closer to understanding. The river continues to flow around them, but the current between them has fundamentally shifted. The rock offers no lasting safety. The water still holds the remaining razorbacks, a shifting, hungry mass waiting just beyond the short-lived calm. Leaving the outcrop means re-entering the current. It means another swim. Jack watches Rin. The Vashal's movements are slower now, less precise. He presses a hand against a deeper bite on his side, and his breathing has a shallow, tight quality to it. The energy he spent fighting the current, the blood loss from a dozen wounds, it's taking its toll. He's fading. They can't wait for him to recover. The rock is too exposed. The sun is already beginning its descent, and the jungle on the far shore promises only more danger after dark. Jack makes the decision. It isn't a grand gesture. It's a tactical assessment. He points toward the distant bank, then at himself. He mimes a loud, clumsy swimming motion, then points at Rin and makes a smoother, quieter gesture. He'll go first. He'll make noise, draw the predators. Rin will follow in his disturbed wake, conserving what strength he has left. Rin's eyes narrow, assessing the plan. He gives a single, sharp nod. No argument, no thanks. Just acceptance. The understanding is complete. Jack pushes off the rock. The cold is a fresh shock. He doesn't try to swim quietly. He thrashes. He kicks his good leg hard, slaps the water with his arms, creates as much commotion as a wounded animal. He is a beacon. Almost immediately, the sharp nips begin again on his legs and arms. The razorbacks converge on the disturbance, drawn to the splashing, the vibration. He ignores the pain, focusing on the far bank, kicking and pulling through the water. Behind him, Rin enters the current. He moves with a fluid, silent efficiency, his body cutting through the water with minimal surface disruption. He stays directly in the churned-up path Jack is creating. The fish, distracted by the louder, more violent activity ahead, pay him less mind. Jack feels the strain in his muscles, the burn in his lungs. Each bite is a fresh jolt of pain. He keeps going, driving forward, his vision narrowing to the line of muddy bank growing steadily closer. The water grows shallower. His kicking feet scrape against slick, rounded stones on the riverbed. He can stand. He stumbles forward, waist-deep now, then knee-deep. The razorbacks, reluctant to enter the shallows, begin to peel away. He turns. Rin is right behind him, moving slowly, one arm pressed to his side. Jack reaches back, grabs the Vashal's arm, and hauls him the last few steps onto the wet, gravel-strewn shore. They both collapse. They lie on their backs in the mud, gasping, chests heaving. The river continues its flow a few feet away, a constant rushing sound that no longer threatens them. They are both a mess of blood and water, their flight suits torn in 100 places, each small wound stinging with the abrasive touch of the air. They made it. The river threw everything it had at them. It tried to wear them down, tear them apart, and consume them. It failed. For a long time, neither of them moves. The only sound is their ragged breathing and the endless push of the water behind them. The crossing is done. The temperature drops fast as the light fades. The jungle doesn't get quiet at night. It changes its voice. The low buzz of insects gives way to deeper, more resonant calls. Something large and unseen moves through the trees not far from their small rocky shelter. The cold is a physical presence, seeping through their wet clothes, making their myriad wounds ache with a dull, persistent throb. Fire isn't a comfort. It's a necessity. A barrier. A source of heat to fight off the deep chill that could kill them as surely as any predator. The darkness beyond their small circle of light feels alive and hungry. Jack gathers dry moss and brittle sticks from under an overhang, his movements stiff. Rin stands a few meters away, his back to the fledgling fire, his body a still dark silhouette against the deepening night. He holds his retrieved vibro knife low and ready, his head tilted, listening to the sounds of the jungle. He is a sentry. The trust is there, but it is a practical thing. They both understand the threat is outside the circle of light, not within it. The fire catches, flames licking up from the tinder, growing stronger. It pushes the darkness back a few precious feet. The light is harsh. It shows the full extent of the damage. Jack's hands are a mess of shallow, angry cuts. His face is bruised, one eye nearly swollen shut. Rin's blue skin is marked with dark purplish welts where the razorbacks bit deep. A long, fresh scar runs along his jawline from the crash. They look less like soldiers and more like men who have been dragged through a grinder. The firelight reveals the cost of the day in stark, unforgiving detail. The silence stretches, filled only by the crackle of the fire and the alien chorus of the night. The immediate fight for survival is over. Now there is only the waiting and the thinking. The war creeps back in, a ghost at the edge of the firelight. Jack watches Rin, this enemy who has saved his life twice now. The question that has been burning in the back of his mind since the river finally finds its way out. His voice is low, rough. Sanctuary outpost. Your people bombed a civilian research station. Women, scientists, kids. Why? Rin doesn't turn from his watch. His shoulders tense almost imperceptibly. He is silent for a long time, as if weighing the value of the words. When he speaks, his voice is flat, devoid of the propaganda-laced venom Jack expects. It was not a civilian station. It was a weapons lab. They were developing a targeted bioagent. He turns his head slightly, his profile etched by the fire. A virus, engineered to target our specific genome. It would have made our skin dissolve. From the inside, humans would be carriers, unharmed. The words land with a physical weight. Jack feels the ground of his understanding shift. Sanctuary was a name meant to inspire trust, safety. He had seen the reports, the images of burning habitats, the list of non-combatant casualties. He had carried that righteous anger like a shield. Now this warrior, this enemy, tells him it was a lie, a fabrication to cover a horrific truth. The moral high ground he thought he stood on crumbles into something complex and ugly. I was ordered to bomb a settlement on Cygnus Prime. Rin continues, his gaze returning to the dark trees. A trading post. No strategic value, just people. I questioned the order. They called it hesitation. Called me a sympathizer. He says the last word like it leaves a bad taste in his mouth. That is why I am here. On the frontier. A punishment detail. The revelation hangs in the air between them, thicker than the smoke from the fire. They are no longer just a human and a vassal. They are two soldiers who were fed a version of the war that served someone else's purpose. Two men who saw through the official story. Two men who refused an order because it crossed a line they would not. The enemy isn't the blue-skinned warrior across the fire. The enemy is the machine that sent them both here to die for a cause built on lies. The landscape between them has been completely redrawn. They are not enemies. They are deserters from the same dishonest war. The cave mouth was a dark slash in the cliff face, half hidden by thick ropey vines that wept a constant cold condensation. It offered the only real shelter from the things that hunted the surface at night. The air that flowed from it was several degrees colder, carrying a damp mineral smell and a faint, almost subsonic hum. They entered slowly, the world narrowing to the circle of light from Jack's salvaged palm lamp. The tunnel walls were smooth, worn by ancient water, and glistened with moisture. The floor was a treacherous mix of slick rock and scattered brittle things that crunched underfoot. Bones, some large, some small, all picked clean. The cave was not a sanctuary. It was a larder. The silence inside was a different kind of pressure. On the surface, sound meant life, movement, threat. Here, sound meant death. Rin held up a closed fist, the universal signal to stop. He tilted his head, listening. From deep within the labyrinthine passages came a sound that was less a cry and more a physical vibration, a high, piercing shriek that seemed to resonate directly in the teeth and bones. It was followed by a faint rustle like dry leaves skittering across stone, but multiplied by 100. It was the sound of movement in absolute darkness, winged screamers, hunters that navigated and killed by sound alone. Rin moved close, his voice a breath so quiet it was almost inaudible. The rock here, he whispered, his lips barely moving. It has a strong magnetic field. It interferes, dampens higher frequencies, mutes our steps, our voices, but not enough. Not if we are careless. He pointed to the bone-littered floor. Every misstep, every sharp intake of breath, every rustle of their gear was a potential beacon. Their progress became a slow, agonizing ballet of silence. They placed each foot with deliberate care, avoiding loose stone and debris. They communicated with glances and the barest gestures of a hand. Jack's injured leg was a constant liability, a throbbing reminder of his inability to move with the absolute control the environment demanded. They moved through a wider chamber, the ceiling lost in darkness high above. The bones here were piled thicker, a grim testament to the cave's efficiency. Rin paused, pulling a small device from a pouch on his armor. It was a compact scanner. He activated it, and it projected a flickering, rudimentary map of the tunnel system in a pale blue light, highlighting magnetic concentrations and potential paths. It was their only guide through the maze. A new sound began, not from ahead but from above. A scrabbling, clicking noise growing louder, denser. Rin's head snapped up. He killed the scanner's light, plunging them into near-total blackness. Jack froze, his hand going to the vibro knife at his belt. The scrabbling became a cascade. Then they dropped. Dozens of them. Juvenile screamers, wingless but with the same elongated heads and gaping razor-filled mouths. They hit the ground around them like a living hail, squirming and scrambling, their bodies pale and blind. They didn't need wings to hunt. They fell on their prey from above. One latched onto Jack's boot, its needle teeth grating on the hardened composite. He shook it off with a violent kick, the motion too loud in the silent chamber. A unified shriek echoed from the tunnels ahead, the adults hearing the disturbance. Rin didn't hesitate. He grabbed a large, heavy femur from the floor and hurled it with all his strength across the chamber. It clattered loudly against the far wall. The response was immediate. The shrieking focused on the new sound source. The juvenile swarm turned and scrabbled toward the noise, a seething, pale mass drawn away by the diversion. Rin pointed urgently to a narrow side passage the scanner had indicated, one with a high magnetic signature. They moved, no longer trying for absolute silence, just speed. They pushed into the tight tunnel, the magnetic rock pressing in around them, a palpable heaviness in the air that seemed to swallow what little sound they made. The shrieking of the adults remained focused on the far side of the bone chamber. They had used the hunter's own biology against them. They kept moving, the narrow passage leading them upward, away from the nest. Rin's knowledge had just turned a death trap into an escape route. They break through the last of the thick foliage and step onto a wind-swept ridge. The air is clear here, sharp and cold. Below them, a deep valley is choked with a low-hanging, opalescent mist that writhes like something alive. This is the mist nest. The high ground offers a sweeping view of the terrain they've crossed and the obstacles still ahead. For a moment, it feels like an advantage, a chance to finally breathe, to plan. The feeling lasts about 3 seconds. Rin goes still. His entire body tenses. His eyes are fixed on a point down in the valley, just at the edge of the mist. A wreck not human. The sleek angular lines and dark iridescent hull plating are unmistakably Vashel. A fighter, smaller than Jack's Star Falcon but just as thoroughly destroyed. It lies broken and silent, and it is not alone. 6 figures move around it in a slow, deliberate patrol pattern. They are Vashel but different. Their armor is a darker, non-reflective black, edged with deep crimson. Their movements are synchronized, efficient, predatory. They carry heavy plasma rifles, and their helmets are equipped with enhanced sensor arrays that sweep the area in constant, overlapping arcs. Jack looks from the hunters to Rin. The Vashel's face is a mask of cold dread. "This is not a rescue party." "Angelites," Rin says, the word a low exhale. "They are not here for you. They are here for me." He doesn't look away from the scene below. They hunt deserters. Those who question. Those who converse with the enemy. He says the last part with a bitter edge. His refusal to bomb a civilian target. His cooperation with a human. It has all been logged, reported. His own people have sent their most ruthless enforcers to clean up their problem. Him. Their survival is no longer just about the planet. It is about escaping a dedicated execution squad. One of the Angelites bends over a piece of the wreckage. A flicker of weak blue light pulses from a cracked console. A distress beacon. It's still active, running on backup power. Its signal is weak, probably too distorted by the planet's magnetic field and the mist to be heard by anyone in high orbit. But it's a chance. A slim, dangerous chance. It is their only potential link to the outside world, to a ship, to any kind of rescue. The irony is a hard, cold knot in Jack's stomach. Their hope for survival is resting inside the wreckage of the very ship that brought his would-be executioners to the planet. To reach it, they will have to get past 6 heavily armed, highly trained hunters who exist for this exact purpose. The calculus of their situation is remade in an instant. The jungle's predators were a random threat. These hunters are a deliberate, intelligent, and terminal one. They are not just surviving anymore. They are being hunted. Their path forward is no longer just through terrain. It is through the enemy's own technology, and the soldiers sworn to protect it. They must use the tools of the hunters to evade the hunters themselves. The wreck below is no longer just debris. It is an objective, a prize surrounded by a perimeter of death. Their next move is not about finding a path of least resistance. It is about choosing the only path left, no matter how suicidal it appears. The ridge offers a view, but it offers no comfort. Only a clear picture of the trap that has been waiting for them all along. They move through the wreckage not as mourners but as scavengers. The angular fragments of Rin's fighter are a catalog of potential. A power cell here, a half-melted targeting array there. The Engelites have already swept the site, taking anything of obvious tactical value. They left the scraps. They underestimated what scraps could become. 6 hunters against 2 survivors. The math is brutal. Their only advantage is that the hunters expect prey, not ingenuity. Rin's hands move with a surgeon's precision, prying a cylindrical housing from a shattered engine component. He explains its function in clipped technical terms. A gravity induction coil, used for stabilizing flight in atmospheric turbulence. It pulls matter toward its core with a brief, intense pulse. Jack listens, his engineer's mind translating the alien principles into human terms. A weapon, it can be a weapon. They work together, a silent assembly line of desperation. Rin directs Jack to harvest the carbon titanium struts from his own Star Falcon's wreckage, filing their ends into sharp, needle-like points. The materials are a hybrid of their 2 cultures, fused by necessity. They construct 3 launchers. Each is a crude, ugly device. The induction coil forms the base, wired to a salvaged power cell. A strut is loaded into the firing channel, its sharpened tip aimed forward. The trigger is a simple contact switch. They are single-shot, unpredictable, and devastatingly powerful. They bury 2 of them at the choke points of the natural rock formations leading up to their ridge, disguising the triggers with loose shale and dry moss. The third they keep. The terrain is their true weapon. The ridge is a natural fortress, but its value is in its flaws. The rock is shot through with deposits of ferrous ore that play havoc with sensors. The Engelites' helmet displays will show static, ghosts, false readings. Their superior tech becomes a liability. They will have to rely on eyes and ears. Jack and Rin use this. They study the paths a hunting party would take. The lines of least resistance, the cover points, the blind corners. They set their traps there. They think like the predator to defeat it. They also think like the other predators, the local fauna. They know the starhounds are territorial. They use scraps of ration packaging to lay a false scent trail leading away from their actual position, toward a known nesting ground, a distraction, a conflict they won't have to fight. The hunters are professionals, but they are strangers here. Their training is for clean, spaceborne combat or urban pacification. Not this. Not a fight against a planet itself. The final element is psychological. They create signs of panic. A discarded bloodied bandage near a dead-end crevice. A deep scrape on a rock face suggesting a desperate, clumsy climb. They want the Engelites to see 2 scared, injured men on the run. They want them to get sloppy, to rush, to believe in their own superiority. The hunters expect a tactical retreat. They are walking into a planned engagement. When the work is done, they settle into a watch position. The ridge is no longer just high ground. It is a web. Every rock, every shadow, every breeze has been incorporated into the defense. The 2 spike launchers in the ground are their first line. The one in Rin's hands is their last. They have turned a patch of hostile wilderness into a killing field, tailored for their enemy. Their defense isn't built on military doctrine. It's built on a deep, intimate understanding of desperation and the willingness to use every single thing at their disposal, no matter how broken or alien. The environment is no longer a threat to be survived. It is an ally to be wielded. The cockpit is a cave of twisted metal and shattered glass. The emergency beacon is their only shot at rescue, but it requires a physical connection. The central console has to be manually activated. The idea is a simple one. The execution is a nightmare. The 6 hunters are making their final approach up the ridge. Their dark armor is visible now between the trees, moving in a tight professional formation. They are not rushing. They are methodical. They know their prey is cornered. Rin makes the decision without a word. He picks up the last spike launcher, the one they kept mobile, but he doesn't aim it. He breaks the housing off with a sharp twist of his hands, exposing the long, sharpened carbon titanium strut inside. It is no longer a launcher. It is a spear. He looks at Jack, then at the approaching hunters. His meaning is clear. He will create a diversion, a violent, attention-grabbing noise. He will become the target. "This is no longer your fight, human," he says, his voice low. "It is not a declaration of ownership. It is a statement of fact. He is the one they want. He will use that." He moves off to the right, keeping low, using the rock formations for cover. Jack doesn't argue. There is no time. He turns and ducks into the jagged opening of his own crashed Star Falcon. The interior is a mess of hanging wires, buckled deck plates, and the sharp, coppery smell of ruptured coolant lines. The corridor to the cockpit is partially collapsed. He has to squeeze through a narrow gap where the ceiling has dropped, sharp edges catching on his torn flight suit. His breathing is loud in the confined metallic space. Every second outside is a second Rin is buying with his life. He reaches the cockpit. The forward viewport is a spiderweb of cracks. The pilot's chair is shredded. The main control panel is dark, littered with debris, but one section is still faintly illuminated by a weak, flickering internal light. The emergency systems panel. It is marked with the universal symbols for distress. Jack brushes broken glass from the console. The interface is cracked. Several buttons are missing. He finds the main power toggle. It clicks into place with a reluctant grind. A single small screen sputters to life, displaying lines of fractured Vashal script and standard numerals. It is only partially functional. His fingers work quickly, tracing the connections Rin had described. He bypasses a blown fuse using a stripped piece of wiring. He reroutes power from a secondary cell. The screen stabilizes. The menu for the beacon appears. The option is there. Transmit on all frequencies. It is the gamble. It will blast their location and a standard distress code across every comm channel. Military and civilian, human and Vashal. It could bring a rescue ship. It could bring another squad of hunters. He doesn't hesitate. He hits the command. A low hum builds within the wreckage. A light on the panel turns from red to a steady pulsing blue. Outside, he knows a transmitter array on the Falcon's battered hull is now sending out a repeating signal into the void. It is a shout in the dark. It has no allegiance. It will be heard by anyone listening. The immediate relief is instantly replaced by a colder, more complex dread. They are no longer just hiding. They have announced their position to the entire quadrant. The race is no longer just to the cockpit. It is now a race to see who will answer the call first. The hunters below are no longer the only threat. They are the first of many. They come up the ridge in 2 squads of 3, moving through the cover they had set. The first spike launcher detonates. It doesn't fire the strut. The magnetic pulse misfires, overloading the power cell. The sound is a deafening crack of energy that echoes off the rocks. It doesn't kill the hunters, but it stops them cold, disorienting their sensors and splitting their formation. The second squad flanks right, pushing through the false scent trail. A starhound's enraged roar tears through the air, followed by the sharp report of plasma fire. The trap works. It buys them a minute, maybe less. The 3 hunters from the first squad shake off the disorientation and push forward. They are professionals. They adapt. They stop using their helmet sensors, relying on line of sight. They move quickly, using the terrain for cover. They are on them in seconds. The fight becomes close, brutal, and personal. There is no room for tactics. Only reaction. Rin meets the first hunter with his spear. The impact of the clash is metallic and sharp. He parries a blow from a plasma rifle stock, drives the point of his spear into a gap in the hunter's armor at the thigh. The hunter goes down with a choked cry. The second hunter fires. Rin shoves Jack hard to the side, taking the full brunt of the glancing plasma burst on his own shoulder. The smell of scorched armor and seared flesh fills the air. Rin stumbles, his arm going limp, the spear clattering from his grip. The wound is deep, the energy discharge crackling across his torso. He drops to one knee, his breathing a ragged gasp. The hunter advances on Rin, rifle raised for the kill. Jack moves on instinct. His leg screams in protest as he lunges, grabbing a long, jagged shard of hull plating from his own wreckage. It is heavy and sharp-edged. He swings it like a clumsy axe, putting all his weight into the blow. It isn't clean. It isn't skillful. It is pure, desperate force. The shard smashes into the side of the hunter's helmet, staggering him. The hunter turns, his movement slowed by the surprise impact. Jack swings again, a wild 2-handed blow that finds the neck joint of the armor. The hunter gurgles and collapses. Jack's hands are slick with blood, his own from the sharp metal. He sees the fallen hunter's sidearm, a compact plasma pistol lying on the ground. He scoops it up. The grip is wrong. The weight distribution is alien. The trigger guard is sized for a larger, differently jointed hand. It feels clumsy and dangerous. He doesn't know its settings, its charge level, its recoil. He points it at the third hunter, who is now advancing, and pulls the trigger. The pistol bucks in his hand, a searing bolt of blue energy screaming past the hunter's head. The report is louder than he expected. He corrects his aim, firing again. And again. He isn't trying to hit the hunter. He is creating a wall of suppressing fire, forcing the hunter to take cover behind a rock outcropping. Each shot is a gamble, the unfamiliar weapon threatening to overheat or misfire in his hands. He keeps firing, the bolts chewing chunks from the rock, pinning the hunter down. He is buying time. For what, he doesn't know. From the ground, Rin moves. He has dragged himself to his fallen spear. With his one good arm, he braces the butt against the ground, the point aimed toward the rock. He is pale, his body shaking from the effort and the pain of his wound. He says nothing. He just waits. The hunter, pinned by Jack's erratic fire, makes a break for new cover. He moves fast, a blur of dark armor. He runs directly onto the waiting spear point. The impact drives the air from his lungs. He looks down at the carbon titanium shaft protruding from his chest plate, a look of pure shock on his face. Then he slumps, his weight pulling Rin down with him. The sudden silence is louder than the fight. The only sounds are the distant struggle with the starhound and their own harsh breathing. Jack lowers the pistol, his arm trembling. The weapon is almost too hot to hold. Rin pushes the dead hunter off him, pulling the spear free with a wet grating sound. He collapses back onto the rock, his eyes closed. They are both covered in blood and soot. The ridge is quiet. The hunters are down. They held the line, not through superior strength or training, but through a raw mutual refusal to let the other fall. The fight was not won by a hero. It was won by a partnership, one covering, one striking, each action perfectly, desperately timed to the other's need. The Alliance ship's descent was not gentle. It tore through the cloud cover, a blunt gray wedge of metal that screamed its way down to the ridge. The thrusters kicked up a storm of dust and rock, the wind whipping at Jack's face. The ramp dropped before the ship had fully settled, and the Marines fanned out. Their movements were sharp, professional, their rifles held ready. Their eyes, hard and trained for threat assessment, scanned the scene. The human wreckage, the Vashel wreckage, the bodies of the Angolite hunters. Then they saw Rin. The reaction was immediate, a physical tightening of postures. The Marines' faces hardened. They saw the blue skin, the alien armor. Their training took over. Rifles came up, muzzles centering on the wounded Vashel. He was the enemy. It was a simple binary equation. One of the Marines, a sergeant, took a step forward, his weapon leveled. "Sir, step away from the hostile," he ordered Jack, his voice tinny through his helmet speaker. Jack didn't move. He positioned himself slightly in front of Rin, his own body a shield. "Stand down," he said. His voice was flat, exhausted, but it carried the tone of an officer. "He's not hostile. He saved my life. Multiple times." He gestured to the dead Angolites. Those were his people. They were here to kill him, just like they were here to kill me. The Marine sergeant hesitated. The contradiction stalled his programming. "Sir, regulations state..." "Regulations don't cover this," Jack cut him off. His tone left no room for debate. He has critical intelligence. He defected. He's an asset, not a prisoner. He looked past the sergeant to the medics now emerging from the ship. "We need medical. For both of us. Now." The medics moved in cautiously. Their training was for human physiology. They looked at Rin's wounds, his blue-tinged blood, his different bone structure, with uncertainty. They worked on Jack first, applying quick seal patches to his cuts, injecting him with pain suppressants and broad-spectrum antibiotics. Then they turned to Rin. Their movements were slower, more tentative. They used scanners, consulted a basic xenomedical database on a datapad. They stabilized his shoulder wound, administered a general coagulant. It was rudimentary care, but it was care. They treated him, not as an enemy, but as a patient. The Marine sergeant watched, his rifle now lowered but not slung. The cognitive dissonance was clear on his face. The chain of command was being rewritten in front of him by a battered lieutenant. Jack stood over the medics, his own wounds still fresh, and continued his quiet, insistent argument with the ship's commanding officer over the comm. He didn't plead. He stated facts. The value of the intelligence, the tactical advantage, the moral imperative. He used what little authority his rank gave him and leveraged the sheer undeniable strangeness of the situation. Finally, the order came through from the ship. The tension on the ridge broke. The Marines stood down completely, their weapons moving to a safe carry. The sergeant gave a stiff nod. The Vashal National is to be treated as a cooperative asset under your supervision, Lieutenant. He will be granted provisional asylum pending debrief. The words were formal, a bureaucrat's solution to a soldier's problem. Rin was not clapped in restraints. He was helped onto a stretcher by the medics, his spear-tip weapon placed beside him, not confiscated. The chain of command had chosen to accept the anomaly. They would deal with the political fallout later. For now, on this ridge, the war had a new, complicated variable. An enemy had been reclassified, not by a treaty but by the actions of two men who chose to see a person, not a symbol. The rescue ship, a tool of the conflict, had just taken its first tentative step across the line. The medbay on Alliance Station Epsilon was clean, quiet, and sterile. The constant low hum of the life support systems was a stark contrast to the chaotic noise of the jungle. Jack's leg was set properly this time, the bone fused with sonic welders. The dozens of razorback bites were treated and sealed. The physical healing was straightforward. The rest was not. Safety did not bring peace. It brought interrogation lights and long, windowless rooms. The debriefings were relentless. They asked the same questions in different ways, their faces neutral, their recorders humming. The political officers wanted a simple story, a tale of human endurance against a savage enemy. They did not get it. Jack's account was stubborn, detailed, and inconvenient. He spoke of the Vashal's medical knowledge, his technical skill, his refusal to kill. He described the Angelites, his own people's executioners. He stated clearly and repeatedly that the biological weapons project at Sanctuary Outpost was a verified fact, confirmed by the enemy himself. This was not the testimony they wanted. It complicated the narrative. It created fissures in the foundation of the war effort. But it also created an opportunity. A handful of senior officers, listening behind the one-way glass, saw past the propaganda. They saw a potential path out of the endless conflict. They saw a strategy. Rin's debriefings were conducted under heavy guard, but with a growing, cautious respect. He did not wear his armor. He was given a set of simple, neutral-colored fatigues. The absence of the Vashal military insignia was a silent statement everyone understood. He was not here as a warrior. He was a source. His testimony was a mirror of Jack's. He spoke of the orders he refused, the intelligence he possessed, the internal factions within the Vashal command structure that were also weary of the war's cost. His knowledge was a key. It turned their survival from a personal anecdote into a tactical blueprint. They were given a room together between sessions. The silence there was different from the jungle. It was the silence of two men seeing the machinery of their lives taken apart and examined. They drank harsh synthetic coffee from plain white mugs. They discussed the questions they were asked. They compared notes. The idea did not come from the admirals. It came from them in that small room. A peace-facing mission, not a surrender. A reconnaissance, a first contact, but for the second time. They would use what they had built on that planet, the trust, the proven ability to operate as a single unit, and offer it as a template. Their argument was practical, not philosophical. A war based on lies was a waste of resources. A conflict that turned its most skilled soldiers against each other was a strategic failure. Their survival was the evidence. They had already done the impossible. They had already created a working model of cooperation in the most hostile environment imaginable. The top brass, after much debate, agreed to listen. The personal experience of two soldiers on a lethal rock began to inform galactic policy. The goal was no longer total victory. It was a viable exit strategy. The station, a bastion of military might, became the unlikely birthplace of a diplomatic gambit. The uniforms and the plainclothes sat across the table, and for the first time the conversation was not about the last battle. It was about the first step. The bridge of the conquered hummed with a low, hybrid energy. The consoles were a patchwork of human interfaces and Vashal crystalline displays. The lighting was a compromise between warm human standard and the cool blue spectrum Vashal eyes preferred. The air recyclers blended the subtle, clean scent of Alliance filters with the slightly sharper, ozone-tinged Vashal atmosphere. It was a ship built from two separate halves, forced into a single functional whole. The crew was the real test. Humans and Vashal moved through the corridors, their body language a study in cautious coexistence. Mealtimes were quiet, segregated affairs. In the engine room, a human engineer would watch a Vashal technician's hands warily, questioning every adjustment to a system they'd been trained to sabotage. Old prejudices were a low-grade infection in the ship's systems. A misplaced tool was suspected theft. A terse exchange in a hallway was seen as a threat. The war was over on paper. It was still being fought in the quiet glances and the tense silences. Jack and Rin operated from a shared command station at the center of the bridge. They did not take turns. They led together. When a navigation plot was needed, Jack would outline the human strategic concerns, fuel efficiency, known patrol routes of still hostile fringe factions. Rin would then overlay Vashal tactical data, gravimetric anomalies their sensors understood better, the locations of clan territories that were neutral on a map but fiercely independent in practice. Their commands were a quiet, continuous dialogue. A nod from one would authorize an action from the other. They had already built a language on that planet. They used it here. Their first mission was to establish an outpost in the Tycho system, a place scarred by years of orbital bombardment. The site selection was a masterclass in their new method. Human engineers identified a stable planetary shelf with rich mineral deposits. Vashal scouts pointed out a natural cave system that provided perfect protection from the system's frequent radiation storms. They built it together. The structures were a fusion of prefabricated human modules and Vashal biopolymer construction that grew into place. It was designated Outpost 1. Then they built another, and another. These stations became more than military installations. They became markets. Human medical teams armed with the biological data Rin provided set up clinics. They treated Vashal colonists for a genetic lung fibrosis that had plagued their frontier settlements for generations. In return, Vashal herbalists shared advanced regenerative compounds that dramatically accelerated human tissue repair from blast injuries. Trade followed medicine. Vashal crystalline circuitry, superior for navigation in chaotic nebulas, was exchanged for human-designed power cores, renowned for their stability and longevity. The exchange was not altruistic. It was practical. Each side had something the other needed to survive on the harsh frontier. The doubt never fully vanished. There were arguments. There were security incidents. But the results were undeniable. Supply lines that were once bleeding routes for warships now carried food, medicine, and technology. The outposts thrived. The conquered would visit each one, a floating reminder of the template. The crew itself began to change. The human engineer who once watched the Vashal technician now asked for his opinion on a reactor calibration. The shared work, the tangible success of each mission, began to dissolve the old suspicions. They were not friends, not yet, but they were colleagues. They were a crew. The ship, a clumsy hybrid, flew. The outposts built on contested ground stood. The cooperation was not a theory debated in some admiral's office. It was a working system. It functioned. The hall was vast and silent, built for declarations of war, not peace. The air hummed with the low power of dozens of environmental systems, each tuned to the needs of a different species. Light fell in hard, formal beams on the central podium. Jack and Rin stood at the edge of the stage, their formal attire feeling like an unfamiliar uniform. The clothes were a compromise, a dark, simple cut for Jack, a similar style in a deep blue-gray for Rin. They wore no military insignia from either side. Their presence alone was the symbol. The audience was a sea of faces from 12 different worlds, a mix of curiosity, hope, and deep entrenched suspicion. You could feel the disapproval like a cold draft from one section of the chamber. Not everyone wanted this. Peace for some meant betrayal for others. Rin stepped to the podium. The light made his blue skin seem almost pale. He looked out at the crowd, his gaze moving slowly across the representatives of empires that had spent generations teaching their children to fear his kind. He did not use the flowery language of diplomacy. His voice was the same even, factual tone he'd used in the jungle. "We were taught to see a uniform first," he began. "An enemy, a symbol of a political idea. It is easier to destroy a symbol than a person." He paused, letting the simple, ugly truth of it hang in the air. On that planet, the symbols were stripped away. There was only a wounded man and the choice to offer a hand or a weapon. We believe that how we treat the vulnerable defines us more than how we treat our equals. The words were not an appeal. They were a statement of observed fact. He had seen the man, not the human. It was a quiet revolution, stated without drama. Jack took his place. He looked older under the lights, the scars on his face thrown into sharp relief. He didn't look at the diplomats. He looked at the veterans in the audience, the soldiers who would understand the cost. "We spent years, resources, lives," he said, his voice low and clear, "fighting the wrong war." We were pointed at each other by men in rooms far from the consequences. We fought for flags, but the real enemy was the lie that we had to. It was a brutal, honest assessment, an admission of collective failure. It wasn't about blame. It was about correction, about learning from a lethal mistake. A ceremonial badge was presented. It was not a medal for valor in combat. It was a new insignia, a circle forged from the alloy of a human fighter and the crystalline polymer of a Vashal interceptor. It was given to them both, a physical object representing the merger of two technologies, two cultures, two enemies into a single purpose. The gesture was simple. Its meaning was immense. The applause that followed was not universal, but it was enough. It was a start. They walked from the stage, the weight of the new badge light on their jackets. The ceremony had not changed the galaxy. It had merely drawn a line. It had created a new possibility, where before there was only the certainty of continued conflict. They had become living proof that the path of least resistance is not the only path, that the most deeply ingrained hostility could be overcome by a series of practical choices made under fire. The two men, once designated enemies on every military chart, had redefined what was possible. They were no longer just survivors. They were a blueprint. The message came in on a little-used frequency, faint and distorted. It originated from the Melon Nebula, a patch of space both sides had long declared a navigational hazard and written off. The signal was a standard distress call, but the identifiers were strange. The modulation off. It wasn't human. It wasn't Vashal. It was a third voice, small and lost in the dark. It was the kind of problem that would have been ignored a year ago, filed away as a ghost signal or a trap set by the other side. Now it landed on the bridge of the Conquered, a new kind of challenge for their new kind of crew. The old methods wouldn't work here. Sending a warship would be an act of aggression. Ignoring it would be a moral failure. The solution had to be a different shape. It had to be built on the same principle that got them off that planet. The Conquered's mission parameters were rewritten on the fly. It wasn't a patrol. It was a response. A first contact born from a cry for help. The ship's mixed crew, once a source of tension, became its greatest asset. Human pilots navigated the known gravitational shears at the nebula's edge. Vashal sensor operators interpreted the strange energy readings bleeding from the signal's source. They worked the problem together, not as allies against a common enemy, but as partners seeking a common solution. The ripple of their story reached further than the nebula. It traveled through covert channels back to the Vashal homeworlds. 3 clan leaders, powerful figures with fleets at their command, had watched the Conquered initiative from a distance. They had seen the joint outposts flourish. They had seen the medical exchanges save lives on their own frontier colonies. They had watched 2 sworn enemies build something that worked. They began to openly oppose the High Command's doctrine of endless expansion. They argued it was a waste of blood and resources. They pointed to the human border and asked a simple, dangerous question. Why fight an enemy when you could trade with a partner? Their dissent was not a coup. It was a pivot. They didn't send battleships to the Melon Nebula. They sent envoys. Their ships were not armed for a fight. They were loaded with medical supplies, agricultural samples, and engineers. They went not to conquer or to spy, but to make new friends. They followed the template Jack and Rin had created. They offered a hand first, not a weapon. They understood that survival on the harsh frontier was not a zero-sum game. A strong neighbor could be a better defense than a weak enemy. The political landscape began to shift. It was a slow, grinding movement like continental plates. The cooperation on the ground, at the outposts, in the clinics, began to breed a political movement. It was built on practical results, not idealistic speeches. The shared survival of 2 men on a lethal planet became a strategic lesson for entire civilizations. It proved that the strongest alliance is not always the one with the most guns, but the one with the most shared interests. A rising tide lifts all ships. The distress call from the Melon Nebula was no longer just a problem to be solved. It was an opportunity to prove the principle worked on a larger scale. The true enemy was never the other side. It was the darkness between the stars, the isolation, the unknown, and against that everyone is stronger together. Admiral Chen met them in the observation deck. The stars hung in the viewport, cold and distant. He didn't offer congratulations. He handed them both a data slate. It detailed the political fallout, the fractured alliances, the rogue factions on both sides that saw their peace as a betrayal. Your choices matter more than any fleet movement right now, Chen said. His voice was gravel, worn down by decades of command. People are watching. They see the outposts working. They also see the cost. Leadership isn't about picking a side. It's about balancing truths, holding them both at once. The road ahead was a long, steep climb. The initial success of the Conquered was a small fire in a very large dark. The data slate listed a dozen systems on the verge of breaking from the new accords. 3 separatist vassal clans were arming. Human mercenary groups out of work thanks to the ceasefire were hiring out to the highest bidder. The peace was a fragile thing. It would not defend itself. It needed guardians. It needed a symbol that was more than just words. Rin studied the star charts on the slate. His blue fingers traced a contested system, a place of old battlefields and fresh grievances. He looked at Jack, then at the Admiral. "I will lead the peacekeeping force there," he said. The statement was quiet, absolute. It was not a request for permission. It was a declaration of intent. For a vassal warrior of his lineage, it was an almost unheard-of pivot. Not conquest, not defense, peacekeeping. It meant standing between his own people and their former enemies. It meant his rifle would be aimed at anyone who broke the truce, regardless of their uniform. Jack didn't hesitate. He didn't consult a chart or check his own orders. He simply nodded. "I'm with him." The 2 statements, made seconds apart, sealed it. Their pathways, which had converged on a deadly planet, would not diverge now. They would walk the harder road together. The choice was made not out of loyalty to a flag or an admiral's command, but to the principle they had built their survival upon. Someone had to be the first to stand in the gap, to show that the new way was not just a political fantasy, but something men with weapons were willing to fight for. The resolution was not a victory. It was a commitment. The destructive conflict of their past was giving way to a shared purpose for the future, but that purpose would require more fighting. A different kind, a harder kind. They were not stepping back from the fray. They were stepping into the heart of it, this time by choice. The enemy was no longer the other side. The enemy was the chaos that fills a vacuum. The enemy was the idea that some lines cannot be crossed. They had already crossed the biggest one. Everything that came after was just holding the ground they had taken. 2 enemies chose to see the person behind the uniform on a lethal world. Their survival became the foundation for peace. Outposts now prosper where fleets once clashed. A shared resolve turned a crisis into common ground. Brotherhood doesn't require shared blood or banners. It starts with a choice, an offered hand, a refusal to strike. Sometimes the bravest weapon is not a blade or a blaster, but a moment of mercy. And in that moment, an entire war can pivot on the simple act of choosing a person over a principle.